Have you ever encountered a hurdle with launching or growing your business? Listen, there are two things that run a business, the back end and your soft skills.
Telling you right now, if these aren't in place, you'll lose clients and you'll lose money. You don't want that? Well, you're in the right place.
Hey, I'm Dana.
Hey, I'm Sarah.
We're your hosts of the Entrepreneur Encounter, and we're going to give you a behind-the-scenes glance into our businesses, give you genuine feedback, tips and tricks, plus occasionally bring on guests that care about supporting you to grow your business organically and nurturing authentic relationships. Are you ready?
Welcome back to another episode of Entrepreneur Encounter. We're your hosts, Sarah
and Dana.
And in this episode, we welcome Amy Wartham, where we discuss the critical role of soft skills in both personal and professional settings. Amy emphasizes the importance of emotional intelligence, effective communication, active listening, and fostering a positive workplace environment.
If this conversation sparks your desire to strengthen your own soft skills, we invite you to check out our Soft Skills Studio, a space where purpose-driven entrepreneurs like you gain practical tools to lead confidently and communicate effectively. You'll find the link in the show notes to learn more and join our growing community. Now, let's get to that episode. So, welcome, Amy. I'm so excited to have you actually finally meet Sarah, because I know that was one thing. As soon as I talked to you and you were like, soft skills are life, I was like, I don't think we've ever had a perfect fit on this podcast. So, can you tell us a little bit about you and how you use soft skills specifically in your life?
Absolutely. Soft skills really are life. Sometimes I even call them survival skills, because anybody in business or walking around breathing these days have to have soft skills. It's a requirement in order to be a good human being. My background, I've been at UNC Charlotte for 25 plus years, specifically in this role for 20 years. And as the director of corporate training and executive ed, that is really my focus, is to go out, talk with organizations about their workforce development needs. We customize the content and then bring it on site. And probably about 85, 90% of what we do is centered around these soft skills like emotional intelligence and conflict resolution and basic leadership skills, communication. All of these things are necessary for individuals to be successful in an organization and in life.
Okay, what's the word where people like fangirl? You know what I mean? Like, I'm so over the moon with this conversation already. And I think it's really wonderful because no matter what you're doing in life, soft skills are essential. And we talk about like your personal and professional development, and it's all connected. It's like this huge circle, because the way your life is affected in your personal life affects the way it is in your business, your workplace, whatever the case may be. So this is very exciting to me.
You know, a lot of people are like, no, when I'm at work, I'm at work. And when I'm at home, I'm at home. And some people are able to separate it. But for a lot of folks, there is that bleed over. So if you've had a fight with your spouse before you head out the door to work, then yeah, you might need some emotional intelligence that day just to deal with your coworkers, because you're having all these feelings, and sometimes you might take them out on your coworkers. So
definitely don't need that. I've seen that happen. So when talking about like being aware of your emotions, self-awareness, I remember when I was working in corporate, the CEO walked in, throwing a fit, like throwing the door, throwing papers. And our office was open, so we didn't have no doors to close an office. So we can hear it throughout the whole building. And it's like, come on, you are the CEO and you're walking in and your team sees this. Like, if you are walking into the office and something's wrong, like say, hey, I need a few minutes, or can someone come talk to me to like help me calm down, rather than throwing an attitude. Like, you're setting the tone for the day. You're setting the tone for your team and all of that.
In our EQ class, we actually show a video clip from the Sandra Bullock, Ryan Reynolds movie, The Proposal. And when Sandra Bullock comes in, everybody starts panicking and putting away the magazines and putting on high heels and all this good stuff. And there's an IM that goes around and says, "It's here, not she's here, but it's here. We talk about the ripple effect, how you approach your team, how you approach everybody in your organization. That attitude has a ripple effect. If you come in and you're throwing things and yelling, then automatically you put up some walls and put people on the defensive, and it creates this environment of tension, and nobody wants to work in that kind of organization. So especially with an EQ, you have to take notice of that ripple effect for sure.
I want to dive deeper into that a little bit. So with that type of environment and during the class, how do you coach others to develop effective communication and those key relationship building skills, mainly in professional lives, but anything you learn in that sense will definitely spill over, we know, into personal lives. For a little background and context, when I was going through a divorce, I leaned heavily into gentle parenting, mainly because I needed to gentle parent myself. I needed to think out loud and work through my emotions and sit with it and become more aware, because every behavior is a need. And so I was like, what do I actually need right now? And then I used that on my kids. And now I use that when I talk to people professionally, like, why is the CEO throwing things? What do they need right now? So how do you implement and coach that to others in your daily life?
Part of it is, I would say, take an EQ assessment. There are some free ones online. I'll be also happy to share ours. You can take it. The first thing is to build awareness around yourself. If you are in a stressful situation, making sure that you're breathing. That's probably one of the biggest things is when something happens, just remember to breathe. I have found myself when I'm in stressful situations, because I've been sitting there for 45 seconds, almost a minute, and haven't taken a breath. So remember to breathe. Be aware of what your hot buttons are. If you know that you're going into a meeting and Janet's going to be there, and Janet is always who she is, she's doing Janet things, maybe know that she's going to press your hot buttons and be prepared for that. So I think a lot of it is really just knowing who you are and being aware of your own triggers so that you can learn how to manage those. And we talk about with EQ, there are 4 quadrants: self-management, relationship management, social management. The other thing is sometimes just stepping away from yourself, and you don't always have to be the main character in your story. Sometimes there are supporting folks that are in the organization. Look to see what they're doing. If you say something and somebody physically recoils, then maybe you have not said the right thing at the right time in the right tone. So looking at body language, not only keeping your own in check, but looking at the body language and facial expressions from other folks. That is one of the things I've had to work really hard on in my life, is usually whenever I'm thinking comes out on my face. So if somebody says something stupid to me, I'm like, okay. I don't know that I'm thinking, wow. Actually, I do like really, really target in on some of my facial expressions and my body language, but also looking at other people and seeing what they're doing too.
There's like memes I've been seeing circling around lately with like, I don't always respond, but then it's like how my face responds, and it's like Schitt's Creek characters. And I'm like, oh yeah, that might be me.
Going back to like self-awareness of being aware of your emotions on how you handle certain things and your body language. I used to cross my arms a lot, and now I don't, because apparently I look intimidating with my arms crossed, and I don't want to come off like that. So every time I go and cross my arms, I'm aware of it now than I used to be, because I was told, it was somebody just like, hey, this is what you come off as to a lot of people. Maybe you don't want to do that. And receiving that feedback was a little challenging for myself, because I know that I'm not like that. So now I'm more self-aware to where I'm not crossing my arms as much as I used to, just because I don't want to go off like that.
And that's one of those things that for some people, they're just simply cold nature. So that's a mechanism for them to stay warm. For some people, it's just their comfort zone, just to sit like that. So if you've got somebody crossing their arms and they're giving a facial expression, then you can kind of pair the two. But if this person's got their arms crossed and they're smiling, granted, they can be doing mixed signals, but chances are they're engaged in the conversation.
To me, it's just so funny because some people have, what's the term, like when you look mad, but you're not mad, the rust-faced or whatever. Like, it's so funny. And another thing too, I want to touch more on the body language because a lot of the times we're remote. There's more remote work. So when I'm in a meeting, I observe a lot and it's tough because obviously you're remote, you're on camera. So it's like, do you cross your arms? How are you supposed to sit and this and that? But so sometimes I catch myself in the camera. I'm like, I don't want to look like, do I really look like that? It's so funny. But I think something maybe people should practice is how they look on camera, because obviously when you're in office with your team, you can look a certain way versus what you can like on a Zoom call or something. So I think that can be a little bit challenging only because you're sitting there. So you're like, okay, you're listening to somebody and you kind of plop there in your seat, right? But I don't know if I'm making any sense.
You are. And honestly, I'm going to admit this, that I don't think I ever really thought about what it looks like on camera other than is my hair in the right place versus my arms crossed. I just feel like, oh, you can see just my face. So as long as from the waist up, I look decent, I think we're good. Mine is usually the eye contact. Though because I have multiple screens or there might be multiple people, I feel like I'm looking at you, Sarah, but it probably looks like I'm looking down and not looking at anything. But I'm looking at your camera picture. It should be looking straight at the camera. So those are the body language things that I look at. Is I look like looking at your face. But if I look at the camera, I feel like I'm ignoring you and I'm going to miss what you say.
Oh, yeah, you're right. When you're on a remote call like this, it's really hard sometimes to tell what people are doing. They could be looking directly at the camera, but they could be doing something completely different. I've actually had a couple of people with meetings that were clearly checked out. They're looking at the camera, but they were doing something else. And we had a person call them out and go, so what do you think, so-and-so? And they're like, and so it's definitely body language. And we don't know what anybody's doing with their hands because unless you've got them up here, kind of hand gestures below the surface. But if you are meeting with folks remotely, the occasional nod and pitching in and agreeing with someone or disagreeing with someone, all of those things are ways to help build trust and build bonds with your coworkers. And again, even though you've got this small box, there are other things that you can do to let your coworkers know that you're engaged with the conversation and that you're fully vested in what they're talking about.
I would hope so. Like when we talk about soft skills, like active listening, right? So when you're like, so what's your thoughts on this, Amy? And then if you go, what? Like, are you like not like, yeah, like you're disengaged. And I think that's another thing too, when it comes to remote work. Oh, another meeting. So that's why some people tend to like check out. But it's like, no, we're here to have a conversation. I would hope anytime I'm in a meeting with a team that everybody engages. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I asked the team something in one of the meetings I was in. I was like, so what are your thoughts on this? And nobody said anything. I'm like, whoa, 5 people on. I'm like, hello.
So none of you have a single opinion about anything. Sometimes if that happens, I'll just sit there. I'm like, I've got till doomsday. I'll just sit here with you. But active listening piece, and we talk a lot about listening in our courses too. It is such a crucial component of any workplace. Most people are thinking about how they're going to respond to the question or how they're going to respond to what you just said. And they're not really thinking about or actively listening to everything that you're saying. Sometimes they think they know what you're going to say and they'll interrupt. And in that case, you're like, well, that's not really what I was going to say at all. It's interesting, active listening. And that's also something that I've had to work really, really hard. My mom used to tell me that I could talk the ears off a donkey, which I don't really know what that means, but we are Southern. So It was not a compliment. And so that's another skill that I had to really stop and really focus on. Okay, what are they actually saying? And if you look at personalities, I'm a D, which is a dominant personality. So I'm like, let's get some stuff done. Just check, 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 check. And if you work with someone that will take you around the bush and give you all these extra ancillary details that are not important, I do find myself struggling to not check out and go, just give me the facts. When you're working with your team, if you understand their communication style and vice versa, it'll make your life so much better. I've got a phenomenal team and they understand to give me just the basics. What are the key points? And then if I want more information, then I'll ask for it. But I'm more of a, sort of a rapid fire type person. But that listening piece, if they don't know your communication style, can make or break a conversation.
It is. And active listening is something I talk about with even my kids, because my oldest son, I tell him, I'm like, I don't think you are wanting a conversation. I think you're wanting to present something to me, because he just talks so fast. I literally have to interrupt him just to nod and say, oh, that's cool. But he just keeps talking like that didn't say anything. I want to talk to you. I don't want to be talked at. But I have a really bad problem. I do interrupt only because I know for me, I'll forget. I'm like, oh, that's a really good point. Let me say something. But if I have to wait until the end of your thought, I'm probably going to forget what I was going to say.
Yep. And if that's the case, you can always explain to them, please allow me to interrupt because this is really important. And then ask your question, because it might be something that needs clarification. In the workplace, a lot of people use acronyms. Some people don't know what they mean, whatever the question. But if you're respectful about interrupting, that's one thing versus just completely jumping in and over talking someone.
Hey there, listeners. Ever feel like you're struggling to connect with customers or lead your team effectively? That's where soft skills come in.
Entrepreneur Encounter isn't just another podcast. We're a community dedicated to helping early stage entrepreneurs like you master the soft skills that make or break a business.
Technical skills are important, but without communication, collaboration, and confidence, your business might never get off the ground to the next level.
In our membership, Dana and I share actionable insights and tips to help you nurture the soft skills you need to thrive.
Give you access to bonus content, workshops, and a network of like-minded entrepreneurs who are all on the same journey.
We'll teach you how to boost your confidence,
become a leader who inspires and motivates your team,
navigate conflict like a pro,
to resolve disagreements without drama and build stronger relationships,
communicate clearly and concisely, get your message across, build trust, and close the deal.
If you're ready to take your business to the next level, join the circle by clicking the link in the show notes.
There's always room for improvement. What you can do too is ask for feedback, because a lot of the times I've noticed, whatever workplace I'm in, people do have a hard time receiving feedback. But if you are giving the feedback, showing empathy and compassion and getting on that person's level and stating okay, let's take this back a notch and have those conversations to help others understand. Because like Dana said, sometimes you have to stop and hey, I have to get this thought out before I forget. So I would hope, depending on who you're talking to, that person can understand the fact that you need to get that thought out. But again, everybody's different and how they receive and give and all that. So receiving and giving feedback to be able to help with the active listening as well. To me, that's a great way to help get your thoughts out.
Yeah. The thing about conversation is that it is a two-way street. So to go back to Dana's child, if someone's just talking at you, that's not a conversation. That truly is someone talking at you. A conversation is where there's dialogue, there's that back and forth. Giving and receiving feedback, that's probably one of the toughest things people have to do in the workplace, particularly as it pertains to performance or processes and that sort of thing. So being open-minded, I'm having this conversation with someone, I try to diffuse tension with humor. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I'll give the hand signal, like the reps, time out. Wait a minute, let me stop you right there and ask or clarify or whatever it is. But that giving and receiving feedback, it's tough. Some people just have no filter at all when they're giving feedback. It's a dump fest. And how does that leave the person? They're overwhelmed. They become defensive. They walk out of your office and all of a sudden it's like, it's time for me to look for a new job. So giving feedback in a respectful manner. And again, I'm old, but one of the things that we were taught way back is the compliment sandwich. Oh, that is probably the worst advice you could ever give anybody, to give a compliment, then tell the person what they did wrong, followed by another compliment. They never hear the feedback that's negative or to help them improve. But if you give feedback in a respectful manner and show the individual the feedback I'm giving you will actually benefit you, it'll help you improve your production for this process. It'll help you communicate better. It'll help you build trust with your team, whatever it might be. And then a lot of people don't receive feedback well either. One time I had a boss, this is when I first finished up my MBA. I am, sort of let's get some stuff done. And I had a boss tell me, well, you realize that you're a lot for people. Of course, I clutched pearls and gasped, and I was like, no, I am just the right amount. But I didn't take that feedback very well. Once I had gotten over the shock of being told that I was too much, I thought about what they said, and I could see where I could be a little bit too much for people. It's not that I'm not being my authentic self, but I do sometimes have to scale myself back just because people are like, whoa, you're a lot to take in.
I like that you specified that you can scale back or adapt your communication style without sacrificing your authentic self. I feel like too often when someone is critiquing, it's like, well, then I had to change like exactly who I am. And that's not the case. It's like love languages. My husband receives love differently than I do. He also gives love differently than I do. And so when we first got together, it was so different. I was like, you don't see anything that I do, and vice versa. And so we really had to sit down and really work through that. That was a whole struggle bus. It was a fun struggle bus, but it was a struggle bus nonetheless. Looking back on it, it was a lot more fun. So when you have a team like that you're working with, where maybe someone's more like you and they're like too much for people, and then there's others who will maybe shy away from something like that and maybe back down, clam up, how do you help teams build the soft skills needed that promote that collaboration, trust, and accountability in a more positive workplace?
Yeah. Anytime you've got a team, you're going to have diverse personalities and perspectives on there. People bring their own baggage with them to work every day. I think part of it is really getting to know your team or the people that you're working with, understanding that they have different personalities than you, and working to adapt or flex your personality to meet their needs. So, for example, if you've got someone that's really quiet during a meeting, well, it's not that they are not understanding content of a meeting or that they don't have an opinion. Chances are they're processing what you're saying and they'll just approach it a little bit different. So if you call them out in the middle of the meeting because they're quiet and go, hey, Dana, we haven't heard from you in the last 45 minutes. What do you think about this? It's going to make them really uncomfortable. However, if you approach it from the standpoint of, Dana, I see that you're processing all of the ideas that we've put out there. Would you give them the option? Would you like to give your opinion on what direction you think? Or from your perspective, again, you're giving them the out to give their own opinion, but from your perspective, what do you think about the ideas that we're kicking around? And if they say, well, let me think about it a little bit more, then that's okay too. But you do want to try to involve those people in the conversation. If you've got somebody on the opposite end that are taking over the conversation and then say, hey, I appreciate what you want to say, but let's hear from so-and-so instead, and maybe redivert. So there's all kind of different ways that you can make sure that everybody feels heard and seen. And that's probably one of the biggest things that we're seeing in the workplace right now is that people want to feel like they are being seen and heard with their positions. And of course, don't even get me started on the different generations in the workplace. That's another layer of complexity to getting along and looking at soft skills from a standpoint of how to build trust and communication and all those components.
I love what Amy said because I've seen it, like calling out people in meetings, like, wait a minute, can we not do that? Again, like going back to everybody's different, their personalities are different. Obviously, like for me personally, I'm a quiet person in meetings, especially if there's people that are talking. But then after it's quiet, I put my 2 cents in. If there's a lot going on, I need to like, okay, this is going on, this is what's being said. But I've seen it many a times when people get called out. Well, excuse me, like you're not saying anything? Well, to me, don't do that.
I'm the opposite. I'm like, we're going to talk about it. Let's figure it out.
Yeah, you've got to make sure that folks are comfortable with that. And if you've got someone that is consistently quiet, you can always take them to the side before a meeting and say, listen, your expertise is in this, and I really need you to step out of your comfort zone today because I need you to help guide this conversation. And if you pose it as a sort of like a favor or an ask, that most people will. If you're respectful and say, hey, you worked on this type of project prior to such and such, are we on track? Again, it gives them that ease into the conversation.
You mentioned workplaces having many different generations. And even if you work remotely, that can be a challenge. So my final question for you is, as organizations face these rapid changes of having very diverse, like there's not even minute differences, there are vast differences between each of our generations. How do you see soft skills becoming even more critical in workforce training and team building?
I think people just need to have an open mind. The older generation, they're like, oh, we never did it that way. Or I think meeting people in the middle. And I am a person that will ask questions. So if someone's approaching a process or situation from a different perspective, then I will ask them, help me understand why you're approaching this from your direction. What is your perspective? And I will share mine. And sometimes just opening up those lines of communication makes the biggest difference because I've got a lot of experience. I have seen some things, but having that fresh perspective from a younger person also can impact the situation. So maybe it's one of those things where you take the best of both and come up with something phenomenal that's way better than what either of us would have done. So again, just having that open mind and just being open to different perspectives and asking questions respectfully.
Yeah, I love asking questions. Like every conversation I have, because I want to know why you think like this. It's not to come off like, because some people sometimes get offended, like you're asking me that question. But no, like I'm curious because I think in order for us to grow, especially if we're working together, I need to know X, Y, and Z so that I can do this a certain way. You know, to me, 2 minds are better than one because I work with different teams and everybody is different generations. Like I like to see how everybody works. So, for example, I ask one team member, how do you manage your time? And then I go to the next team member, how do you manage your time? And then that helps me come up with different ways to help everybody else. Maybe take this idea and go from there. So I really love the perspectives and open-mindedness.
One of my favorite phrases is someone's talking to you is just say, that's interesting. Tell me more. And if you've got the right person in front of you, they will talk. They will start telling you. Now, here's the thing. You got to be kind of like the Mona Lisa smile. It's got to be neutral when you go, that's interesting. You can't go, well, that's interesting. So it's got to be, that's interesting. Tell me more. And that's a great phrase. Again, if you're looking at trying to come up with a new process, my other favorite phrase is, how might we? How might we? And that opens up the possibilities to anything. We use an example of you're on an airplane, and we've all been in that situation where you're cramped and you just feel like you can't move. How do you coming up with the situation that how might we change the way that things are seated or people are seated so that they've got more space? But that how might we opens up the possibilities. And again, if you've got the right person in front of you, gives them a runway to answer it any number of ways. And it allows them to take the conversation maybe down a different path.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Amy, oh my goodness, if we can go on and on and on and on about this, I would love to have you back on at some point, like just to have another conversation, talk about different perspectives and all that, because this has been so much fun. So for our listeners, Amy, where can everybody find you and connect with you?
I am on LinkedIn. So my name's Amy Wartham. You can also email me at awartham@charlotte.edu. If you Google corporate training, UNCC or UNC Charlotte, you can find me there. So I'm everywhere in Charlotte. So you might see me at an event and do a lot of networking. And I would love to talk to companies about their training needs. And this is my jam. So let me know how I can best help.
Awesome. Well, all of your information is going to be in our show notes. Until next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode. Remember, soft skills aren't just some fluffy buzzwords that get thrown around in the corporate world. They're the key to unlocking your full potential as a professional and a human being. Don't be afraid to invest in yourself and seek out opportunities to improve your soft skills. Sarah and I have a variety of workshops, online courses, and complimentary clarity calls for you to practice in real time with us. Links are always in the show notes. And be sure to join us next time for more insights, tips, and tricks to help you succeed in your entrepreneur encounter.